Okay, welcome everyone to Strategy Group this evening. We're also all welcome for Alan, who's back from being unwell. Thank you, so good to see you here. And I do know there's no members of the public. We welcome everyone, and also those members that come to watch events. Start off with the minutes. Is everyone happy for me to sign the minutes from the last meeting? Agreed. Very good, as always, mate. Thank you. Apologies, please. Thank you very much. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Obviously, you've reviewed the agenda yourself and the items that are going to be discussed. But if at any time you feel that you have an interest, then please disclose it to ensure for your integrity of these proceedings. So we appreciate to be aware of that. So we'll move into the first item 4, which is Councillor Cribbin, temporary accommodation policy. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Before you today, you've got a report and a draft policy. The purpose of the report is to seek to consult on temporary accommodation policy in order to assist us in making decisions on securing temporary accommodation for homeless people. Now, I'm informed that the consultation draft largely puts into practice what we're doing in practice anyway. We had a visit from the MHCLG prior to Christmas, who recommended that we ought to have policy in place. It's something that is good practice, and the MHCLG's guidelines suggest that we do have one. So we are proposing to put this policy out for consultation, starting on the 13th of January, going on for a month to the 10th of February. Basically, the Council is committed to assisting those who approach it in crisis, in homeless situations. So this will often require us to provide short-term or more settled temporary accommodation, or sometimes both. This is becoming increasingly more difficult to do so within the districts of Daventry through lots of different factors. The overall supply, basically, cost, largely exceeding what low-income families can actually reasonably afford. So we sometimes do have to place people outside of our district area. Now that could be in all sorts of places. It could be something as close to Northampton or something, but we have to bear in mind how that will impact on the homeless people. Bearing in mind that they are disabled, they're elderly, they may have children, etc. They may want to make sure that we always insist that we make sure the children in the situation are properly catered for, and they don't have to uproot from schools unless they really have to. So this policy is setting out what we will consider when we are considering to temporarily accommodate somebody, and what factors we will bear in mind, and basically hoping to make the best decision for that particular individual on a case-by-case basis. So we are going to propose a draft for consultation. The homelessness, by their definition, are a hard group to reach, to actually consult with. So we are proposing to get in touch with all the local charities that deal with homelessness people as well, to make sure that we can get everybody on board and able to actually give us some sort of feedback. And often homeless people are only temporarily homeless, so we might have difficulty in getting to all those people out there, but we're trying our very best. And we're also going to put it onto the website as well, so and sending it out to parish councils to comment as well. So hopefully this will be relatively uncontroversial for you guys tonight. And see if anybody has any questions I'll have to answer.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cribbins. Councillor Andrew.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I did read this policy, but I felt that there could have been more. There doesn't seem to be anything in place of what we're going to do as a district to get more temporary accommodation. We can see that it's steadily rising, but surely that must be the same across the whole of the country. We keep seeing things on the news that how many people more are rushed to people, how many more homeless, rent increases, people on 0-hour contracts, I can't get where to live. So, what happens if everybody else is facing the same situation as us and there isn't anywhere available? What happens? Should we be more looking at actually what we should be doing within a district to, we've got empty properties, bringing them back into use, or, just looking at a range of different ideas of what we might do. Like, I brought up many a time about the old Landmark Hotel. Recently the job centre was running a recruitment day because apparently it was packed in there that they're going to bring it back into life as a hotel in 6 to 8 weeks. I did speak to Audra about it because I just felt it's just ridiculous. And I really hope that they weren't getting people's hopes up to be promised a job to find that it was just some sort of idealistic idea. But if somebody was looking at doing that and bringing the hotel back into use, why couldn't it be looked at to bring it back into use to house temporary accommodation? So I just felt like, that we should be doing a lot more.
Thank you. Do you want to take a few before?
We can do it.
Let's take a few. And of course, that sort of narrative is important for the consultation and to be heard. So we'll let Councillor Gribbins reply to that, but also making sure that you get your views in this consultation. So those things are. Councillor Guildford.
Yes, I've got 2 points to my questions. One is similar to what, same as Councillor Randall, in that, but more symptomatic in that this is a solution to an issue policy, but what are we doing to fundamentally address the root cause? One line. What we're doing to address the root cause. And the other thing is, we are where we are, and you've had to put people outside the district. I may have missed this, but I would like to see, the figure 50 miles was quoted in one example, is the infrastructure to where they're placed, so that people that maybe don't have vehicles and things like that. So yes, if we have to address them outside the district, some account is taken of the infrastructure for the person to get to work or whatever, or something like that.
Did you capture that one, Councillor Griffiths? Yes. Councillor Morgan.
Chair, I'm sorry to be so trivial, actually. You have some very important points, but I was a stylistic point, actually. On page 8, we set up the definition, bed and breakfast, in paragraph 1 in item 7. Then we go to the paragraphs we refer to B&B, but by the time we got to the 1 and 2, I guess it's the 4th paragraph, we start writing out bed and breakfast in full. I wonder why that was. That looks like, I don't know if that's copied and pasted in or something, but I think it should be consistent in the format as it's a policy document.
Okay, all right, I'm sure that.
If that can be changed, that'd be helpful.
Okay.
Like I said, it's trivial, but I thought it'd be important.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Chair. I share all the concerns that have been raised. But whatever it is that we are going to consult on, I feel that it has got to be expressed in language that treats people who are homeless and temporary homeless as people who have, who have got a problem that we've got to help them solve. Not like people who somehow have done something wrong. I'm looking at section 8. Certainly 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, 8.5, I think that everything is about what rights applicants do not have, rather than the positive things that we ought to be saying. 8.2, we're under no obligation to allow applicants to do temporary accommodation and will not do so except in essential circumstances. Now that actually may be quite a reasonable policy, but the way that it is framed seems to me it's sort of a warning. It's sort of the thing that you would expect from an old-fashioned schoolmaster rather than from a sympathetic counsellor. 8.3 it's again about things that people will be required to do, and if they don't, these are what the consequences will be. Rather than starting, we are in a position where, clearly we have got to, however it is that you would explain sympathetically to somebody who has got, who's in this very stressful time of life where they do not have a home, they need somewhere to stay. Surely, we should be framing our legislation, even with the things that we have got to insist on, but framing it in such a way that we express sympathy for their situation.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you. And Councillor Brown?
Just in response to Councillor Ritchie, I think his point would be entirely valid. This was about a document that was being distributed to people in need of our services, but my understanding is that this is a policy document. This is about our approach to tackling the problem and what we will and won't do. Therefore, it's, to my mind, necessarily written in something approaching legalese and in quite grey and technical language, simply because it's our internal policy document. This isn't about targeting those people who we wish to help and who we wish to inform of their rights. Certainly, I expect a document of that nature to be written in the kind of language that Councillor Ritchie sets out, but I don't think it's about a complaint when we're talking about this particular document that we're considering.
Thanks, Councillor Brown. Councillor Crimmins.
I'll come back then. Yes, firstly I'll answer with regard to Councillor Randall's concern about what I'll be doing more. I mean, I'll probably just reiterate what Councillor Brandon said. I mean, this is an internal policy document. We are doing more, but the policy document is just there to put down our policy. It doesn't tell the wider public exactly what else we are doing. And I appreciate that we do have temporary accommodation which we can use. I take on board what you're saying. Actually, we do probably need more. And I understand that we are looking into that. Obviously, I think Maria Taylor might use a little bit on that. So I think we are looking into further possible options for us to be able to increase our stock so we can give people better accommodation close to home. There are a lot of things that we are doing to try and alleviate these situations. And as I say, sadly, it is a situation across the whole country that's getting worse. The changes in the law make it easier for increase the number of homeless people coming forward, which is, I suppose, in one way, it's a good thing. It's flushing out people, making people aware of the people that have the problems, so we deal with them. It's a duty to deal with them. But obviously, that is increasing the numbers coming forward, and it will be. It's a matter of having to try and take up the extra numbers and us being able to put things in place to accommodate these people. I don't know whether Maria would like to give a bit more information. If you've got any more information about the further things we're trying to do in respect of trying to increase our stock to help that.
I can do if you wish, Chairman.
Yes, please. Yes, ma'am.
You may recall in recent years that occasionally reports come through to Strategic Goodman Council about purchasing an additional property. I mean, we have purchased a couple more properties for temporary accommodation, 1 and 2 bedroom in Daventry itself in recent years. What we're seeking to do in the next couple of months is to do a review of the kind of demand we've got and the kind of needs we've typically been experiencing, and do a bit more of a desktop review of what sort of accommodation we need in the next year or two. So rather than, because the property becomes available that we might like to purchase and doing something ad hoc, we're a bit more structured about get a report strategy that says we need however many types of accommodation, whether that's our own stock, private rent stock that we can have over a short term, or reduce a bed and breakfast. We will definitely need to continue using bed and breakfast because a great deal of handling homeless cases is around very short-term needs, so it can be just a few nights. So it is part of the needs to. The other challenge, of course, is that we would really like to accommodate everybody as near as possible to where they were living and where they work and their children are at school and all that, but we are very much hampered by the demand and the supply out there. There's not a lot of bed and breakfast and hotels that want to work with councils. I was at a meeting this morning, and every district and borough in the county experiences those same challenges. It's about getting that balance, working with the private sector and other agencies to make sure we've got a good mix of accommodation to meet very fluctuating demands.
Thank you. Hopefully that answers some of Councillor Guildford's question there, as part of her question.
But let's go to, is it about that point?
Yes.
Let's go there and then Colin to Councillor.
I hear what you're saying about what you're doing. I would have liked to have seen a report on a specific strategy to address this shortfall sooner rather than later, and that we should have predicted this trend that we would be having to house outside our district because we couldn't accommodate within. So perhaps a report should have come sooner so that we didn't end up with this issue.
Okay, and Maria, do you want to respond?
I think every council in the country accepts that you have to accommodate. When you have demand to meet, when you've got a client through the door, you have to accommodate them there and then. It's emergency accommodation, bed and breakfast. Councils don't own bed and breakfast and hotels around the country. There's no telling where the demands are coming from. A lot of, in your question, you said about root cause. The root cause is a long-term social issue. We don't know where the demands are going to be coming from next. It is a fact that councils all over the country have to accommodate people short and medium term outside their areas. We haven't got people hundreds of miles away or anything like that. We haven't got people in temporary accommodation within our area. We do everything we can to get in a settled tenancy as quickly as possible. So we're actually doing quite well. Our numbers, whilst higher than previously, we do compare very well with other districts and boroughs in the county who at different times have had hundreds of people in temporary accommodation at one time. Our peak is sort of 30, early 30s. So whilst that's a lot more than the 7 or 8 which we've been very high before, we are turning this over as soon as we can. Another root cause, for example, another big challenge for us particularly is that housing associations are not often willing to accept homeless applicants who are bidding on properties that become vacant. We can't make them, they are their own boss.
We'll go to Councillor Morgan, Councillor then Randall.
Thank you, Chair.
Did you finish your bit?
I think so. I was just trying to see if there's any other questions that you want me to respond to. I think with regard to Councillor Guildford's the infrastructure and don't put people 50 miles away and that sort of thing, the policy, although it may not be explicit, it basically says that we will not do that sort of thing. We will bear in mind every single applicant liability. Every single case on its own merits, and if a person needs to get to work, then we won't put them somewhere where they can't get to work, because that's the sort of thing. We will make sure that that's implicit in the policy. That's part of what we will do. Councillor Morgan, about the B&B consistency. This is the Colin bit. I was just thinking Colin and Paul. Sorry. We'll address that and make sure that's changed. And Councillor Ritchie was about the sympathetic part of the documentation. I think Councillor Brown will probably answer that quite well.
I think we have a new round, and then we'll probably bring this debate to a close. So we start with Councillor Morgan, then Councillor Brown, and then Councillor, and then we'll close.
Thank you for the point, Councillor Crabbins.
Touche.
It's a shame, actually. It's a very serious point I want to make. So actually, I mean, the point is we've seen an increase from 67 to 144. Obviously, we're coming to the end of this year, so it'll be interesting to see how this shapes up, actually. I very much welcome visibility of the numbers quite soon. I think anybody, what really I fear actually going forward is, you go to Northampton, so, we had the meeting there the other night, and you walk back through the streets of Northampton and you see all the homeless people. It really scares me to think maybe in a couple of years' time when we're on West Northampton Unitary, we have this situation and more of these people are here, etc. So I think it really does need close attention. That's the kind of serious point I wanted to make. And also the other thing is, with regard to the comments about an internal policy, I don't understand where you're coming from on that, but I suppose by definition this isn't an internal policy. It might guide our staff on how to deal with the situation, but theoretically it would still be a policy of the council, therefore it could be accessed from external stakeholders on the website or what have you. So I take your point actually the members of staff would deal with people sympathetically, and we wouldn't expect to put this framework in front of people, the policy. But I think we've got to be careful. It's not actually an internal policy, I don't think, is it? Insofar as it is viewed by the public.
Yeah.
I think it's about between technical language and making sure.
Yes, making sure we're still approachable, but it is like.
And I think that point is being heard by officers as well. Thank you very much.
That's why I also wanted to pick up the point about bed and breakfast, because we defined the term and then changed the term. That was the summary.
It's good counsel, thank you. Councillor Oakham.
Yeah, I just wondered that out of the 144, that 89 were eligible. I wondered what the 55 that weren't, what happens to them? Do they just stay on the streets, or, I don't know what happened to them, but, there's been a lot in social media for, just like with rough sleepers, where they've converted like these little, almost like a beach hut, just somewhere says they can have a bed and out of the dry or something like that. I mean, and we have got rough sleepers across our district, and obviously you see a lot more in Northampton because it is obviously very compact. But across our district, I mean, there's different reports, people in tents and, all over. So actually, we don't really know what rough sleepers we've got. But, it's something like that, looking at, very, something just to get them out of the cold and wet, really. Well, if they are rough sleepers, because obviously you've got different terminology of what's a rough sleeper and what's homeless and things.
Thank you, Councillor. I think we'd like to deal with that point now. Thank you, Marita.
Okay. In the introduction, those figures quoted, 89 and 44, were historical. They relate to 2017-18, when we had a much narrower duty. It's a local housing authority. So we had 140 applicants, and we had duties to 89 of them. Those that we didn't have a duty to back then, we would have still been able to provide advice and assistance and direct them towards those sources of support. But that is not the case now. If somebody, even if they're intentionally homeless, that doesn't mean they just go away. They remain on our books until their situation is resolved. They would be still eligible to be on the housing waiting list. Irrespective of the fact that it may be difficult for them to be housed. Sometimes people are not suitable to be housed in local authority accommodation because their needs are greater than the kind of housing we provide, so they need much more support. So we would continue to lobby on their behalf for other agencies and that sort of thing. But our caseload is about 5 times bigger than it ever was. Historically, housing was 80% of the workload of the team, and homelessness was 20%. It's done in reverse now. Most of the job now is about dealing with the whole range of homelessness issues. Whether that's families, single people with very long-term needs, people who just can't find certain accommodation. So I think it's important that, if somebody's homeless, even if they're intentional, we still owe them support until their homelessness is resolved.
Councillor Ritchie, please.
Thank you, Chair. We're told that situations arise in which the only option is to accommodate people outside the area. That's understood. And I ask this question not implying any criticism, because clearly we need to think about what things cost. But where are we between, if you like, two extremes? One, that there simply is not accommodation in Daventry that we could possibly use, and the other, there is not accommodation that we can afford to use in Daventry, given the budgets that we have set.
Through you, Chairman, honestly, we'll always try and accommodate within the area where we can do so at what we would consider to be the going rates. Where we have to put a family outside of the area, for example, we can and do put arrangements in place to assist them, perhaps getting children to school, that sort of thing. We try not to move people around while they're in temporary accommodation, but sometimes that's unavoidable. If you've got high demand for hotel spaces, there's a Silverstone or whatever in the area, it's amazing how difficult it is. If that coincides with high demand, we might well be going looking around quite far and wide to find somewhere for a family or an individual to go. So all of those factors come into it. We don't usually use expensive hotels, but if that if demand is very high and there is something that is a better solution than somebody being a long way away, cheaper hotel than would be an expensive or local hotel. So it's very much, we don't have hotels banging on our doors, any of us councils, wishing to provide this, and that's often, there are companies who specialise in this kind of support, and they use a range of, they'll buy houses and things to do that, but we're very careful, we compare our experiences and practices all over, because it's very important when someone's in a bed and breakfast that it is genuinely a bed and breakfast, run like a proper hotel with somebody there. You're often putting a vulnerable person in there. There's been a case recently we were talking about at Chief Housing Officers this morning where somebody, unfortunately, a vulnerable person died over the Christmas period in temporary accommodation, and it turns out in that case it was difficult for a family member to get hold of them because actually the hotel or guest house wasn't answering the call 24/7, and that's what you'd expect. So, we're constantly, we've got these things under review. Bed and breakfast means, we should be able to get into that room if we need to in the potential emergency. So, a lot of balancing factors. It's not just about finding the best price, it's about getting the best value and providing the appropriate support for people depending on their ability.
Okay. I intend to draw this debate to a close. Just one question I have about, we talk about the relevant service users with regard to the consultation. I'm not in trouble for asking the question, but for me it's about that, is it unitary proof? In other words, we are obviously in 18 months' time will be in unitary, so what is the correlation between what we're doing now? In other words, we don't have to redo anything, so presumably we're taking measures now to make sure there's harmonisation.
If you were to look at the existing and incoming temporary accommodation policies across West and North Daventry, you'd be amazed how similar they are.
That's perfect, that's exactly what I'm talking. Okay, members, we need to resolve this with a yes rather than an agreed. So those who are happy to resolve, please indicate. Okay. Are there any noes? And are there any abstentions? Okay, that's confirm this. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Okay, strategic planning issues. There's a few here for Councillor Chalmers. Start off with Ashby St Ledger's conservation area designations. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. I hope that by now members are familiar with the process for the designation and management of conservation areas. We've made a lot of progress in the last 18 months, and it's pleasing to note that. What we have here is the first of two examples of a review of a conservation area. This one for Ashby St Ledger's, Ashby Sullingers as some people call it. And we had in September strategy group, we considered a proposal for a report to go out to consultation. This current report tells you that it went out to consultation. As a result, only one response was received, which said we have no comment, which is pleasing to see because it means that we've got it about right. So the proposal before you now is that we should designate the conservation area boundary as set out in that report, that the minor changes to the conservation area appraisal and management plan also be approved, that we commit further minor editorial changes to make sure that it's a reasonable document, that the conservation area appraisal and management plan then be adopted as a supplementary planning document, and the local list entries should be agreed and further work undertaken on the proposed Article 4 directive, and that will come back to the strategy group in due course. It's pleasing for me as a local Topa, who made use of it for the last 60 years, to see that the pub is on the local list. So the proposal is that you can see the recommendations before you, Chairman.
Thank you. Local member at all? Councillor Clements.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very happy to support the recommendations. As you've heard from Councillor, there were no sort of contrary views expressed within the parish. It seems to be very satisfactory for them, and I think that the officer has done a very good job.
Thank you. The officers will. I think anyone else? Okay, thank you. Let's take that to. Are we happy to recommend? Okay. Any against the recommendation? And are there any abstentions? Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We move on to the next one, which is Crick Conservation Area.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Crick is interesting because it doesn't include the whole parish, because obviously there's a commercial area as well as the residential areas. And again, this came to strategy group for approval for consultation in September. It went out to consultation. There were some responses in this case. They were all positive. Anglia Water said they had no further comment. Historic England didn't seek any changes. The parish council supported the proposal, and a survey respondent raised several general queries regarding the local list, which is often helpful. So the proposals that Crick suggests designated a conservation area which encompasses the majority of the historic centre of the village along High Street, Church Street, Yeltop Road, Lords Road and Main Road, and several historic lanes off these main routes. They're listed there. And there were a number of properties designated for the local list. But I think there are no pubs on that list. No. Oh, the Shoulder of Mutton, which isn't a pub anymore. But there we are. So Crick is one of the larger villages in the district, which isn't a super large one like Longbuckby and Brixton. We people who live in the tiny places think of it as a large village. So the proposal before you this evening, Chairman, is that following that consultation with no gainsaying of the proposal, that as before the proposed conservation area boundary be designated, that the proposed changes be approved, that the further minor editorial changes be included to reflect the fact that the document will be in its final adopted form, and therefore that the conservation appraisal and management plan for Crick be adopted as a supplementary planning document, and the local list entries be agreed as set out in the appendix, and further work be undertaken for Article 4 directions for Crick, and that a further report will come back to strategy in due course. These are recommendations to Council.
Thank you, sir. Anyone wish to speak? If you're happy to, sorry, Councillor Lennox.
Just to say, Chairman, as a local member, I'm thoroughly supportive of the recommendations, and again, I think the officer has done a very good job.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. So if you agree with the recommendations, please indicate. Agree. Thank you. Anyone against? And is there any abstentions? Thank you very much. Final one, sir. Welford.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This one is a slightly earlier stage of the process. Welford is the report that you have before you is the draft conservation area appraisal and management plan for Welford, which hitherto has not been a conservation area, so this is a new one. And really there's not much to say about it, because all we're asking for is a resolved item, Chairman, is that we allow this to go out for consultation, please. and both on the conservation area appraisal and management plan and the Article 4 directions. There's a list there in the resolution for what Article 4 directions would mean in this case. Alteration of windows, alteration of doors, alteration of roofing material, painting of exterior dwelling. This is all because you designate an area as a conservation area because of the historical and architectural interest. And so you don't want people changing that without some sort of approval. So it removes the committee development rights. I hope if you haven't done so already, you will read the consultation draft, because that might be the only opportunity you get to learn about wealth.
Okay, thank you.
It keeps itself to itself. And you will remember from earlier maps that we've seen of the district that the world ends at the edge of wealth, but the rest of the map was blank beyond there because it's in Leicestershire. So there we are. So it's straightforward, Chairman. No real discussion needed because we're simply saying it should go out to consultation.
Thank you very much. But I understand, Colin, Councillor Morgan, you have a comment?
Thank you, Chair. I always like to read my papers on a Sunday morning very early. I always say these are fantastic papers. And what I particularly like about them is so much of the overall paper mass is dedicated to this. And it's such an interesting topic. But I think I heard somebody on BBC Radio Northampton last couple of days complaining about these exercises, saying they were only useful for people who like looking at the places. But I'd also like to say I think it's absolutely fantastic the work the officers do on this. I mean, if you take, for instance, pages 99 to 101, where you've got the pallet and so on, and the fences. And I'm probably a bit sad actually, Chair, but I sat looking at page 101 for about 5 minutes on Sunday morning, thinking, doesn't it give you a fantastic appreciation of the diversity, and most importantly, the work of the officers on this? They actually go around and take those detailed pictures. So it's a very good piece of work, and I should be sad we don't get to read these any longer, actually, Chair. And I think officers should be congratulated on a great piece of work.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't quite share Councillor Morgan's high level of enthusiasm about these, but they are fantastic. I just wanted to pick up on the point about these exercises allegedly only being useful for people who like looking at things. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. We have some beautiful and amazing places within our district, and these places do need conserving. And they do need to be there for future generations to look at and enjoy in the state that they're in at the moment. And so I think it's quite vital we can continue this process, and we're all fully supportive of it.
And I think we had a conversation in the floor the other day, didn't we, about how beautiful our villages are and what a responsibility we should have in actually maintaining this beautiful district we live in.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big one, but I was actually shouting at the radio when I heard this the other day. I was thinking, if you read this document properly and you understand the beautiful, it actually creates a beautiful place for us.
Certainly motivates us to preserve it. So this is a resolved item, so I need a yes from those for the affirmatives. Who's yes? Yes, thank you. Any noes or nays? And any abstentions? Thank you. And it's resolved. Councillor James, feasibility improvement to Kelmar Tunnel.
Thank you, Chairman. The report concerns the recommendation to undertake a feasibility study for improvements at the Kelmarsh Tunnel. Now, the Kelmarsh Tunnel lies at one end of the Bremerton Valley Way, which is a dismantled railway path, about 16.8 miles long. It serves the old railway line between the Thampton and Market Harbour. And it's one of the longest dismantled railway paths in the country. To give you an idea of the length of that, you wouldn't be far short of Banbury if you went from here. That's about the length of that tunnel. And it is used by a lot of people from Northampton, to my own knowledge, people from our district as well, and people who come from outside the area to utilise that path. It's like a linear park in effect. the harbour end of the tunnel, northern end of the tunnel, the northern end of the line are tunnels, a pair of tunnels at both Kelmarsh and at Great Oxon then, and the Brampton Valley Way runs through one of those tunnels. And it has been suggested by a number of people actually that it would be a good idea if the tunnel was certainly illuminated or lighted like tunnels have been elsewhere, to make it much more acceptable for people to actually use the tunnel to continue their walk rather than going on a detour across land and beyond. So initially, when we talk of tunnels, of course, immediately the subject of bats springs to mind. And I don't mean me being bats, bats and protected species and so on. So expert is needed to assess the presence of population of any of bats there, and they might be affected, and other species by the insertion of lighting into this tunnel, and so on. The other possible improvements are things like drainage and the tunnel. I mean, who wants to walk along the tunnel and suddenly put your foot down a pothole and full of water? So things like drainage and of course the paths themselves through. So, and also the possibility of whether a pathway over the top of the tunnel or alongside it could be provided to make it much more continuous without going through the actual tunnel itself. Of course, that would depend upon the attitude of landowners. The position is that the tunnel itself belongs to NCC, and obviously their consent would be needed for any works to be undertaken to that tunnel. As indeed it would be necessary to consult parish councils, user groups and so on and so forth. It's been suggested that a budget be provided of £50,000 to undertake this feasibility study. And before that feasibility study actually takes place, to do an initial assessment of what is possible and what isn't possible. It may well be on an initial assessment by experts. They say, well, you're not going to get anywhere with landowners because they're not willing to cooperate, or other groups and so on. So maybe it might be something that people just can't do. Or it may be that connections to electricity are not possible and so on. So, but subject to that, looking for this budget, which would be for the year 2021, nothing can be done then, until then in any event, like April, because of the possibility of bats being present in the tunnel. Now, if it shows that it is viable and beneficial to carry out certain works there, then that of course we could then consider the possibility of extending that to the Oxenden tunnel as well. So it really depends on that. This is an investigation really into the Kelmarsh tunnel, and then if that proves satisfactory, then we could look at the Oxenden tunnel. So one has to bear in mind that this is used by lots of people from inside and outside the district. It's very valued by Northampton people. Now I know that there have been suggestions that one day the Market Harbour to Northampton railway line might be open, and of course that would render any works that are carried out would render them unnecessary. But that is at this stage, that is a very remote possibility. We do know that there are considerable objections to that from local people. That's evidence from the responses to the Western Thames Strategic Plan. And of course there's a numbers game as well. But it's really too remote a consideration for us to take into account at this stage. So I put it to you then that the recommendation is that feasibility work be undertaken to determine if the improvements could be provided from Brampton Valley Way to Kelmarsh Tunnel, either within it or along an alternative route at an economic cost that would benefit the users, and that a revenue budget of 50,000 be established in 2020 to 21 to fund feasibility work. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Can I have Councillor Gilbert first of all?
Just wanted to check, the stakeholders, NCC owns, operates and maintains the Brampton Valley Way. So who actually owns the tunnels? Are we having any financial assistance anywhere else, or are we funding the whole project?
Yeah,
Do you want to take them in the end, or do you want to take them on?
I'll take them at the end.
I guess so. All right, thank you. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Chair. I do agree with Councillor James in that Kelmarsh Tunnel is very, very attractive to quite a lot of people in the district. Children in particular absolutely love it because it's dark, very dark and spooky. This seems a very expensive way of spoiling it.
Okay, good point, especially at Halloween. Okay, thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to say actually a couple of things. This is one of those papers that would benefit from pictures. And I'm not asking to infantilise the agenda, but when you look at the previous item and how it brings the document to life when we can engage with the topic, this would really benefit from pictures. Actually, many papers would, but particularly this one.
Yeah.
Because actually I felt the need for more visuals on here. So perhaps I'm not so well acquainted with the spookiness of the tunnel. But what actually I did do over the New Year's period, before I settled down to the quick papers, I actually took a walk up Borough Hill. And that surprised me again, because of course the path ends halfway up, and it's a mess up the hill. And it kept me thinking we need to do perhaps more there as well. But when I settled down to this paper, it actually concerned me, this paper. Because of course it's been tried a little bit in the news in the last couple of days. But a couple of questions really kept ringing from mind is, why now? Particularly when we've got unitary coming up, particularly when we've already established the ownership, county council, etc. Where has this been till now? Particularly when we've been talking about the route beforehand. And most importantly, I need from a resources portfolio position to ask members to consider. This is £50,000 now, but actually there may be a lot more investment required later on. Now, are we simply going to run the risk here of spending £50,000 now and not be able to afford or willing to spend the rest of the money? We could be talking £200,000, £250,000. Of course, because it's only a feasibility at this point in time, we don't know if we're going to have the money. So we literally could spend £50,000 now and not spending more on it. I think that could be a waste of money. So of all the papers tonight, I'm sorry to say, it feels like a good, potentially good thing to do. I'm not entirely persuaded.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you for that. I don't think we don't know this £200,000. We don't know much.
Exactly, Chair. You made my point.
We don't need to mention £200,000 because that's spurious. Councillor Wesley.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's been covered really. I was going to say a similar thing to Councillor Morgan in combination with Councillor Ritchie. I think we shouldn't be leaping too far ahead on this tunnel. There is a certain aspect of the darkness and the almost a little bit of difficulty of this tunnel that makes the whole route intriguing. We could probably spend about £50 on signs recommending that people might want to take a torch with them, and that would be done. Yes, it is wet through the tunnel. I've ridden the bike through there unprepared. Did get a little bit caught out, but you could get through. But that's part of the thing, and I'd hate to see us go and spend a lot of money on something that people actually don't want, and would, as Councillor Ritchie said, spoil it for many.
Councillor Randall.
Yeah, I know when I read this paper, first of all I thought, 50,000, I suppose that won't be so bad to like the tunnel, and then I sort of read it and thought, 50,000 just to find out if it's feasible to then not knowing how much it's going to be to spend on the tunnel. So for me, I just, so originally I thought, and then then I'm thinking about other projects that, you know, like looking at safety aspect projects like Ashby Road and all the children coming out of school, and there could be, you know, we didn't have the money for that. So for me, it's a no-no.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Egan.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered whether there was any chance of finding out a couple of things first, because this wasn't actually mentioned, but I'm reading Northampton today, on about 6 at least of their news updates that been mentioned about the railway opening again. No, nothing was mentioned about this, just the railway opening again. So before we perhaps spend £50,000, is there any way that we can find out through Radio Northampton or something where they've got this from, how much chance there is of it coming forward?
Okay, I'm sure Councillor James will answer that. Can we then go to Councillor Osborne, Councillor Lomax and Councillor Miller?
I fish near one of these tunnels regularly, and if you fish there on a Sunday, and it's lovely and quiet until they all come along, and it's like Wicksteed Park there. You can't see them because they're down in the dip behind you, and they all come along and the noise is tremendous. I don't think there's knowing the local layout of the land there and the landowners, I don't think there's a hope in hell you'll get permission to go along the top and not go through the tunnel. I don't think the landowners will be interested one bit. And I think the cost, if the bat survey proves there are bats and he wants to go ahead, the cost of putting electricity through those tunnels will be tremendous. I can't see it happening. Many planning applications that have gone through planning committee also support the view that the Brampton Valley Way should be open and not be subject to the railway being open again and trains going through it. There would be uproar by just about every group possible if that happened. And a lot of planning applications, comments were made by members of the planning committee, certainly, that the Brampton Valley Way should stay open. It's something I personally support. I haven't got a problem surveying the bats while you're in there, but I think what is trying to be achieved is not possible within proposed or past budgets that might be needed to actually complete it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lomax.
As Chairman, I have to say that I agree with almost everything that's been said so far by other members. I think the cost is horrendous for something which is totally unknown. We don't know what the consequences would be. The Brampton Valley Way has been open for over 20 years, and if there'd been a huge requirement and a cry for it to be lit, I think we would have known about it before now. And I just think it's a waste of money. I think that number one risk on page 147 actually says it all.
I think, to be fair, I think there is local support with the local parish councils, etc. But Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chairman. Just want to say, I mean, I used to ride at this tunnel many years ago, my children. All you can see, by the way, Colin, you want to take a picture of the light at the end. It's a little light through the dark tunnel. But going back to reality here, one of the things that could happen actually is the link between Market Harbour and Northampton, transport link. It may not be trains, it could be trams. That's what we do elsewhere in the country, put a tram line down there, and that's one way you could actually have that link. But I wouldn't spend this money, because at the moment we don't know if there's a real option here. Are the government serious about actually reconnecting that line between Northampton and Market Harbour? Because if there is that real chance, I don't think we should spend money on a feasibility study to put lighting up, when in fact, there's no guarantee anything's going to happen beyond that point. And I just think we should get that fact established ready for the MP or for the Secretary of State to say, is this really a go or not a go? Because if it's not a go, then I think take the decision off our hands in a way.
Okay, thank you, sir. Can I go to Councillor Brown first and then you?
Thank you, Chairman. It's been an interesting debate, actually. We don't always get into such a contentious debate at a strategy group. However, on this one, actually, firstly on the issue of the potential reopening of the Berkeley Valley Way as a railway line, I do know from discussions with one of our colleagues who's at my on more than one occasion that there was mention of the potential reopening in a recent strategic planning document that came before this council. So we are at least institutionally aware on one level or another that that is a possibility. How much of a possibility, I don't know. But I'm afraid, Chairman, that my sort of fiscal conservatism has kicked in here, and I do believe that whilst that remains a possibility on any level, it would be unwise to go and spend £50,000 on a feasibility study when, in fact, we could be pouring money down the drain. So I think whilst we shouldn't discount the possibility of lighting the tunnel altogether, I certainly think that it would be premature to go and spend that money on a feasibility study until we know more about the potential reopening of the railway line.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. I think we have to be careful here not to get into a situation, particularly when we haven't had the structural change orders yet come through, but actually we do need to be very focused on what's going to happen next year. And of course I was also, as a member of the public, I guess, at the West Northampton meeting the other day, and we did see the figure there about the 1.9 million, I think is correct, which is about public record being needed, and that will be coming, I guess, through numbers next. We'll have to talk about that in due course. Already as it is, if you take that figure, when I get to my agenda item next, I'm going to be talking about £387,000 being asked for tonight. That always takes down a little bit. But even when you look at even without the numbers, if you look at the risks versus the opportunities, there are 8 risks identified and yet only 3 opportunities. I think, like Councillor, that says it all. And I think having heard the debate and also being, of course, the portfolio holder from resources, I am minded to vote against the recommendation.
Okay, I think I would like to say a couple of things before we go back to Councillor James. There is local support, and it does meet the visions of this district council, and it comes down to encouraging people to actually get out and to take exercise. And both parish councils actually, this is something that is locally wanted and has been asked for over a period of time, and I know the local member has been quite supportive of that. So I think there is a need. Of course, I'm quite surprised that the 50,000 sum out of, to put a set of lines in perhaps isn't as easy as I would have thought, and I would have also thought it should be carbon neutral and perhaps not connected to the main grid, but somehow become self-sufficient in keeping the lighting system going there, and maybe an opportunity to innovate, maybe to come up with some ideas on how to do something like that without making it carbon neutral, etc. So I do think there is, had this been in our patch, on our wall, maybe we would be more supportive if we knew actually that there was a local demand and a bigger demand to actually encourage people to actually use that area. Those people that don't particularly like dark tunnels, so I think it's important that there is another side to the argument. But apart from that, Councillor James, do you want to respond to some of the concerns and worries before we go to the vote?
As best I can on this one. The question of ownership, the motorway itself belongs to NCC, so I understand. And the tunnel, in terms of its infrastructure, would belong to NCC, presumably have an easement straight through. But the surface of the land, that I do not know who owns the actual surface over to the tunnel. That would be the subject of the investigation, to find out who owns that land.
Chairman, I understand it means good to own the profit and there is private
So they would have the yay or nay anyway. So even if it was feasible to go along the top of the tunnel, if they said no, that's it, similarly, it may be that experts deal with the ecological factors. I mean, there's wildlife apart from bats that might use the tunnel. They might say it's a no-no because there are other species of bats. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't go in that tunnel for a very good reason anyway, because I come across creepy crawlers quite often. I don't like it.
Perhaps you're not the best person to be sponsoring this one.
Well, no. So I would be in favour of lighting on that basis.
All right.
But I can imagine that there are lots of people like me who say, no, I'm not going in because you don't know what's down there.
All right, okay. We don't want to scare the public, do we? This is public meeting. I'm sure that there's a perfectly crime-free area. Nobody's asking members, I think we're probably, remember this is just a strategy group that can vote, and I think, can we do this by hands? Because I think it is obviously, there is a diverse opinion. Does anyone want to speak further before we go into that vote? Okay, first of all, those who are for the recommendation, can you just raise your hand and we'll get the
It's got good support there.
There's nothing like following them. And those who are against the recommendations, please, can you show? I think that is quite clear. And 8 and other abstentions. Okay, that recommendation is not followed through. I don't know whether some of the concerns and worries can be taken up, whether it's well resurrecting, if there could be some more clarity. But we'll take a look at it at a later stage. But thank you for the debate and thank you for considering that paper. Okay, and Councillor Morgan. I think you're on stage now, sir. Capital and Revenue Budget, Medium Term Financial Plan.
Thank you, Chair. So you've been asked to make a decision on 3 recommendations this evening. I'll come to those shortly, but in terms of the overall structure of the paper, it's quite a short paper, this one. Normally, really, we wouldn't necessarily have this paper at this point in the cycle, but we've been asked to, some items on here you've been asked to look at, which actually, given the previous item, you might find one of them particularly interesting, because it does ask for £200,000. £200,000, correct. So first of all, let's have a quick look. So the table 3.1, the medium-term financial plan, members have already seen that table previously, so you'll be familiar with it. It was presented at full council, our last full council on the 5th of December, and of course that sets out our general fund revenue reserves projections. As members will know, when these numbers have run through, plus any updates, etc., for the next meeting, that'll be updated in due course. So, the first thing I'd like to point out then is section 4 of that section A on 152. These are revenue growth bids. Now, it's not a perfect science, because some of these become recurring items, small revenue numbers, but if you do a pretty headline and tot the numbers up, if I've done my maths correctly, come to £387,000. However, because we have removed one a couple of minutes ago, this is the item for the feasibility of installing lighting, that's on 154, then that number actually falls to 337. Now, I've asked Audra going forward, for the time we have remaining at least anyway, to put a small summary at the bottom of each one of these sections where we're asking for money. And I think it'd be really good for transparency to say, particularly at this point in our life cycle now, we are asking you this evening to agree to say £330,000 expenditure. Because even though we have money in the bank, of course, and we've been very careful, and we do need to invest in the district as best we can to leave a good legacy, we've still got to be careful to remind ourselves that whatever we spend now will not be able to be spent again in the future. And of course, even though the districts may be disappearing, the taxpayers aren't disappearing. That's what I particularly care about. So let's have a quick run through of these. To members in the room, some of these are probably surprisingly dry topics. The first 2 alone talk about work that needs to be done here on these premises. And again, the keen-eyed of you may say, well, what about the future of this building and why do we need to spend money here? Which really goes back to the topic. But some of these are compliance-based issues, and therefore, to make sure we're safe and legal, they're non-negotiable. So I'd like you to, if you like, cast your eye over those very quickly. I'm sure you have done already, but bear that in mind. The next item, as you move on to page 153, regards Rainsbrook. I'm not intending to go through these exhaustively, but to make absolutely sure you're clear, this is an additional £10,000 you're being asked to put in, which would then take us up to £20,000 per annum for that facility. So basically, as things obviously start to wear out and need replacing, that's why we need that extra money in the pot. The next item, which is a large item, and again I'm sure members may have some opinions on this, and for the sake of transparency, it's 4 times bigger than the figure I actually spent on Calmarsh. Actually on this one, it's not necessarily my role to push this forward and say it's a great investment, but if you look at it, this is a very strategic investment in appraisal of that part of the town. And I know certainly when, as a member, I go out knocking on doors, I'm sure other, particularly town ward members would have, is that area of the town always comes up as an issue. Then finally we have the on 154 N Sports annual contribution, and this is basically currently SLM have been paying for that contribution. That'll move over to us here in the District Council, and it's an £8,000 contribution. And everyone know, of course, the amazing profile we have on sport and the fantastic work at Council Hills, etc. The final item, of course, has been crossed off, the feasibility. Then we move on to a couple of revenue items, implications. We have another one relating to here the civic offices. That's a £5,000. And then the next one's quite interesting, as all members will be aware, of course, been interesting conversations and agreements about the moving over of services to the Town Council. Will give us an impact there of £20,000 to draw your eye to, which we can draw down from the Special Expenses Reserve. So essentially we've already paid that money. Section B in that section is basically relating to the council tax going forward and the council tax. So that number there you can see 32,445.69. For the avoidance of any doubt, that is not a pound. That's the number of Band D notional properties. The really interesting number I'd like to draw your attention to here is the 896,896M. That is basically when we do the council tax calculation of our expectations on what we do know, and what we project. This is additional money that has been raised over and above what we projected. That's not necessarily because we're very good at collecting, it's because of circumstances in the calculation change. So that's a positive for us, that we've got that extra money in the pot. And then there is a specific item you've been asked to give particular attention to in the recommendations. That relates to section 4.4, which is very simply about the authorisation for the Chief Executive in conjunction with CFO to be able to use these monies. And it's very simply a practical issue, a time issue, to make sure we can, first of all, retain any monies that are coming in particular in relation to any ring-fenced funding, and also basically to make sure we can use the money without having to give it back, so in a very timely way. And the other important thing to bear in mind is here, as we know, officers can be very, very busy, of course, with the transition, and we want to make sure we keep that money in the pot. So that's why there's a special recommendation on that one. And finally, in the section 2, I'd like to draw your attention to provision of secure cycle storage at Lodge Road with a cost of £6,000. Quite frankly, I queried this one in pre-meetings and I said, why this, why now? But of course, it's basically on employee surveying work, basically found that one of the objections to more sustainable transport, such as cycling to work, was because of security of cycles. And actually, both for our public and our staff, this could make a very small investment, could do that. But one of the things that perhaps totally might surprise is quite a few things here relate to Lodge Road, but of course we have to keep the building in good condition and compliant, and of course, for all we know, even though we may not be here, we may of course be here for many years to come, and of course that is an unknown at the moment. Finally, the medium-term financial plan will be updated again at the next meeting to reflect any agreement we have on this evening. So finally, I'd like to point out then, going to the recommendations. I've been through number 1, which is the revenue growth fees are approved. And you can see the figure there, 337. It's notional because obviously some of those are repeating. Number 2, now on your desk in front of you, you'll have an updated recommendation. We basically wanted this recommendation here to replace a recommendation on the paper, page 151, because it was a clearer recommendation. But this is really basically text that you can see in section 4.4, really put something down. And then finally, the capital bid that we've spoken about a moment ago is approved, the capital programme updated accordingly. So that's what I'm asking for your support on for tonight, members. And one thing going forward that you will have is much more clarity on the sums of those numbers, so you can stand here and go, tonight being asked to commit £337,000. I think we need that clarity as we go forward to the end of the council. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councillor.
I'd just like to ask, I know it's just this, so on the larger thing here of the appraisal of Daventry South East Employment Area, has there been a paper previous to this that I've missed? I only asked that because we had a paper earlier on discussing the expenditure of 50,000 where we had a lot of risks detailed against benefit, and that's paid for 50,000 expenditure, but here we have, a few paragraphs in a paper. Things like the work to the buildings, it's got to be done. Whether we're here or we're not here. If there's health and safety or there's a maintenance issue, it has to be done. But with the amendment to the recommendation, I have full confidence in our section 151 officer that if it's not needed, just move the work down to the chief exec, then they won't give authorisation. So I've got no problem with that. The main problem here is for such a large amount of money, I would like to have seen, I find it difficult to agree that figure on 4 paragraphs. That's my problem.
Okay, let's deal with that specifically now. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. If someone's going to pick the that'd be great, actually. I'll get lots of some paragraphs.
Chairman, the reason that it's in this report is partly just that the process it's gone through in the way it hit the budget cycle. But the background to this is it's a fundamental part of the Council's policy in the Settlements Countryside Local Plan. There is a substantial amount of evidence, which is obviously available on the website, setting out why we needed an additional employment allocation for Daventry, because essentially the town is a highly successful employment site, particularly for smaller businesses, for manufacturing, engineering, but there is very little accommodation available for those businesses. So for that fundamental reason, there was a need to allocate additional employment land at Daventry, and that site was decided to have the best location for it. It has a number of obviously related benefits, including sorting out the scrapyard, the derelict hotel and so on. So in that context, members are, I think, very well aware of the reason for that site. It's sort of topography and the challenges it faces, I think, are obvious to anyone who visits the area. And therefore, although I accept it's a fairly large amount of money, if the council is to progress the policies it wishes to see implemented, it is a necessary investment.
Do you want a supplementary, Councillor Guildford?
I would have just rather have seen a full report listing full of details and risks and everything than just a few paragraphs, in the interests of scrutiny.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, very much on the same point as Councillor Guildford. Obviously, most of it's been covered, therefore, £200,000 in anyone's book is a significant amount of money. And I just echo the sentiment that if we're going to have a dedicated paper on a £50,000 spend, then we should be afforded the opportunity to adequately scrutinise a £200,000 spend. Notwithstanding that, I think the explanation that has been given by the officer is convincing. What we have in front of us is more or less an executive summary of why we're doing it, what we may gain from it, the fact that it may end up being self-financing, all of those positives, and therefore got no reason to mount an objection to it. But moving forward, I would just like to place on record the desire to see, well, we are proposing a significant increase in our revenue budget, but we have a full paper setting out all the risks and all the potential benefits of the policy we're spending that magnitude.
Did you have a particular maximum sum or minimum sum?
I'm not going to pluck a figure.
Okay, all right, but that may be something that we could discuss and then come back to this. Can I go to Councillor Hills first, please?
Yeah, thank you. I read this quite thoroughly, and I read it 2 or 3 times, and then what finally made my mind up, I support this, and I support the amendment to recommendation 2. When I looked at page 156, and it outlines there the priorities and our objectives. And when you look at that, it meets our priorities, it meets our objectives. And we are, it says, the district recognised being open for business. Totally agree with that. Promote health, safe and strong communities. We've got to agree with that. Encourage a safe and healthy lifestyle. So I certainly support this. And I think, yes, we look at we're spending money, but to me, they look like worthwhile opportunities and things that we've been cemented in the way we've performed over the last few years. And although we're going into a unitary, I think we should maintain those standards that we've set and that were outlined in this report.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hills. Councillor Osborne.
Chairman, I and several members of this council have spent the last couple of years on a local plan group, trying to sort of get together where this council wants to be in the future, planning development, and not only Daventry but the district. This particular plan group, and a lot of them that are here, emphasised over and over again the need to improve the entrance to Daventry, i.e. What we've been talking about, the tip, the hotel, Dennis Place and our piece of land. It looks like a dump as you come in from the south, and it does look like a dump. And the sooner that dump is got rid of, the better. Now, all the members of that group had those intentions because it was this council's thought, priority to improve that entrance to Daventry. And the only way we can do it is to potentially put money into it. I would have expected the officers, which they have done, to have realised what the priorities were of this council and of that group, and it's here. Get on and do it. Get on and do it. Spend the money. If it needs spending, spend it. If you can do it with the private sector, do it with the private sector. But don't let us look at that tip and mess as you come into Daventry for much longer. Let's have a Daventry that looks good and is good. I want to see that money spent. I'm sorry. Get on and do it. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Councillor Osborne.
I'm not sorry. No.
I'd like to go to Councillor Randall first. Councillor Morgan, because then you can do some tidying up, possibly. Councillor Randall.
Yeah, just thinking about Councillor Osborne's comments. The scrapyard place has had work done to it recently, and I'm not sure really what you can actually do to that. It looks like it's here to stay, and
move it.
You know, I mean, you can't just make him move, can you? Well, it was moved a long time ago. And again, as with the Landmark Hotel is up for sale. And as I said, there was a recruitment day downstairs in the job centre. They're looking at reopening it, so I don't know how far that's got. I will be going back down to the job centre and see if I can find out. On the cycle, the covered bicycle stand thing. It was only a few years ago that there was one placed over at the leisure centre, and there was quite a lot of discussion over that, and that was to be used by council staff. So is it being used by council staff or not? Because that was, you know, there was quite a lot of in-depth report on that, making sure that it was the best that it could be and it was safe and it was secure and it was undercover. I come past it the other day and there was only about 4 bikes in it, so I would have thought that there was enough room for council staff to put their bikes in there.
That's a good point, thank you. Can we go to Councillor Morgan and then I'll come to two gentlemen over there.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I think you've got some other comments, so I don't quite wrap up, but unless there's anything major, I'm necessarily got anything to say. But what I would like to say is it's refreshing to have some debate on the medium-term financial plan. And I fully expect and anticipate we will and we should have more, actually, because as we see the end coming, we need to scrutinise the way we're spending. We can't just add a legacy over where there's nothing in the pot, as tempting as that might be for us. And of course, I'm sure soon anyway there will be conditions in regard to that anyway. However, for me, of course, particularly as a town ward member, the appraisal of Daventry South East is critically important. But you can't escape the notice, since we all pretty much voted against the previous item on 50, that you can't simply look like you just probably said, even though it's comprehensive. And I think I totally agree with Councillors Guildford and Brown. If it's that level of money, we need to be very careful, even to have this a short separate paper in the run-up to this saying, this is why we're doing it, and then you'll get to it at this point in the paper. Because it feels kind of odd tonight. Of course, notwithstanding that, I will also vote for my own paper, of course, and I think it's got general support because people do support that concept, but I think there's a bit of a mismatch on the approach that we've taken.
Good, thank you. And with regard to that point, if you could give me some emails and feedback on what sort of stuff I can talk with the Chief Executive and then maybe formulate some sort of policy around that and get back to you on that, that point. Councillor, can I have Councillor Chandler first, then Councillor Chairman?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I don't normally contribute to debates on financial matters, as you will notice, but I picked up some suggestions of complaint that not enough was known about this particular proposal, and I just wanted to point out about the Part 2, the Settlements and Countryside Part 2 local plan. This has been debated as part of that plan development over the last 2.5 years, and there have been comprehensive reports of that debate fed back to council, even if people didn't come to those discussions. And I could perhaps take this opportunity to warn you that we will be bringing the Part 2 plan to February Council for adoption.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. It's about the appraisal of Daventry South East employment area. I agree with Councillor Osborne that we should be getting on with this and getting on with it as soon as possible, because we're only 5 months away from becoming a unitary, when this will all disappear completely into the ether. And 200,000 in the context of this site and the benefits it can bring, it's not a large sum by any means, because it will involve construction professionals across the piece, architects, surveyors, engineers, planners and so on. They'll all be involved in this, plus extensive legal opinion, I expect, as well. So, I really do think we ought to get on with it. We do need extra employment there. We've managed to get the knoll off the ground after how many years? The best part of the end of 16 years, something like that. And if we don't do this, I'm sure it'll be relegated right down the bottom of the park. And anyway, I've saved you £50,000 already this evening. So it's only 150. So it's worth doing, and I think Councillor Osborne has got the experience. He knows we should get on with it and get it done.
Thank you, Councillor James, and I apologise for my misspeak. Councillor Richard, please.
Chair, I don't wish to sort of change the subject away from this particular area in a second piece. I had a question on the first bullet point under 4.2. But if you want me to keep that until all of us have the go at the 200,000, let me know. I just wanted to ask in that particular one, clearly what is proposed is important, something that has got to be done. But is the decimal point in the right place? 93,000 for what I assume requires the fitting of a few new switching units and a bit of rewiring. Seems quite extraordinary. I just wonder if you could, if one of the officers can say anything about how this particular cost relates to, hesitate about asking us, but how it relates to the financial advantages of having the solar panels there in the first place. It seems a colossal amount of money for my understanding of what the job is.
Okay, sir, that's interesting. Councillor...
Mr. Thank you, Chairman. The council has a number of solar arrays. The biggest is on the roof of the Hambleside Dangle building. That has a peak capacity of 143 kilowatts. It's a very substantial piece of kit. So the bits of wire and the pieces of equipment to disconnect that level of power is substantial. We also have a large, or like as large array on the roof of the leisure centre and smaller arrays on the roof of the Avenue. So the combination of those sites, I appreciate that you made the impression it's just Lod Road, actually isn't. I'm pretty sure this is not Lod Road at all, it's using Lod Road as an example. And these three sites are the ones we need to deal with. The kit required is indeed of the right order, and I do doubt. In terms of the receipts, you've caught me on the spot. I think the income is in the order of tens of thousands a year, certainly from the Hambleside installation, it's the largest. So I think even given this additional cost, the installation does still worthwhile.
Yeah, can I say to you, thanks for that. My reading of the paragraph was that all this referred to Lodge Road, which is why it seemed an astronomical amount.
Yeah, it says public and commercial buildings.
Used by various buildings, sorry, Chair. It says
Yeah, okay. So we've had clarification and we've voted clarification. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's not understandable that we'd reach out, because obviously that sort of last sentence, that first paragraph due to it. But I think you're right, and I'm pleased you picked up on that, because it is £93,000, and we have to question that, and particularly when we got a £200,000 appraisal, that's nearly 50% of the cost, isn't it? And I was thinking, what's a sensible amount without drowning us in too much paper so we can move fast? Is it £50,000? In that case, £93,000, you've established it needs to be done. So therefore we have to spend that really, although it is painful. My final point about the 200,000 versus the 50,000 earlier. It's surprising because some meetings you can spend all this money, and particularly Councillor James spends money sometimes like it's going out of fashion, but when you start to deconstruct it and say, well actually given where we are, is that a good place to go? And I really do hope members support the whole package this evening, but with this really healthy conversation we've had, which is refreshing actually, and this is the way we should go forward this year, and say to yourself, £200,000 investment there will give us a hell of a lot of leverage going forward, whereas I think for me my position was 200 there gives us a lot more than £50,000 on the tunnel. And even though they're both big amounts of money, the £200,000 gives us a hell of a lot of benefit. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And it's also about, I know officers are here to listen to the debate, and I don't want to get in lost, which was Councillor Randall's point about the fact that there was and hopefully that will be looked into, to making sure we're not duplicating or wasting, even though it's £6,000, it's still important that we may be quality assured as a result of these debates, the officers then reflect upon it and making sure that we are spending the money as it's going. Councillor Hills.
Yeah, I just want to come back on this business about the cycle rack outside the leisure centre. It depends on when you go there. I sometimes go and yes, it's empty. Another time I go and there's freestanding bikes because it's full. It's particularly advantageous to us as a council when we have the triathlon and things like that. because on the days of the triathlon, that council rack there could be used 6 or 7 times over. So yes, it's not used all the time, but on a triathlon, people have got bikes, people come up in their own bikes, others then do their laps and they put their cycles in the rack there. So it's one of those things, depends on when you go, depends on when it's used, but it's used extensively at certain times. And I think that therefore a rack for the people for use in the council here would be an extra provision.
Okay,
thank you. Maybe I will have, I don't know if this is the last word, but I have had these conversations. When we have our pre-meeting with officers, rest assured I've raised those points actually, and I've had some feedback on this. And it's, I suppose ticking the sustainability box is great, but still you say that's £6,000 worth of council tax per annum. I think my plea to all members this evening is please pay maximum attention to these as we go forward in the current months.
Yeah.
Actually, I'd like to get to a position where I won't be spending any money if we come to these meetings. We need to leave as much as we can in part.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Guilford, and then I will be closing down unless you come up with a local order.
No. All I'm going to say is that clarification on my earlier point, that, I'm not against the South East. It's just the principle. I know I'm here, and we have to sort of be scrutinising things appropriately. Second is that, and I'm not shot down in flames here, again we have to think forward to the unitary, going back, it's only 6,000, not going to create a big fuss, but we do have to be mindful of the fact that we don't know where we'll be in 18 months' time, even if we're using this building. So we've managed without something like that. For how long have we been here? I don't know, what, 30, 40 years? Oh, at the top there. Those sort of decisions, do we not ought to look at with that in mind, that, is that an absolute necessity? And then last point, I just want to say, yes, we declined the Calmar tunnel recommendation earlier. By approving this recommendation on this governance issue as a package, we're not then approving the expenditure. But it's in here.
And then I understand that, let's just get clarifications.
No, that decision will carry through, and you did say that in your introduction.
Yes,
the package of minus cameras.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can I also echo, really good debate, and it needs to be scrutiny, and we need to, it doesn't matter whether it's 6,000 or £200,000, this is all public money, and the more that we challenge and allow our officers to reflect on the expenditures, that's exactly our role. But, okay, President.
It's a quick question, Chairman. It was my belief from 30 years ago that the hotel that we talk about had structural concrete problems and could not be used again as a hotel. Am I right in thinking that is still the case and it can't be used for habitation?
I don't think that is correct. I think that was
I'm wrong.
That was an issue that was raised to deflect the non-usage patterns that were being put.
So it's not a true fact.
It would have to be checked.
Yeah.
Because it was an issue back then. But I believe it was almost a camouflage issue.
Thank you.
Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the portfolio holders privilege. I would simply, a final replea to members, when you get this, do pay attention. It's a smaller item tonight, so it's that law is that we scrutinise it more. But I think members need to go through it and say, look at them and say, why are we spending this now? Yeah. What value is it going to give in the remaining period? I would do this myself, why didn't we spend this money before in certain situations? Why now? What's the rush? Are we spending because we want to get rid of everything before we can? I don't want to hand that. I guess it's where you declare interest as somebody standing for unitary, but we don't want to hand the legacy over to our public where we have lots of expenditure and training we may not be able to do. I think we have to move into that territory.
I do not think that we are spending frivolously, but also there is a responsibility to ensure that what we can do for our residents that is appropriate and will benefit from meeting the vision of this council, then we should do it while we have some money.
Yes, Chair, totally agree. That question should run through every decision in the section. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so those of you that are happy to recommend the financial report, please indicate. Okay, anyone against? And are there any abstentions? One abstention. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Is there no urgent business?